Greetings, leaders. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Leadership is Podcast. I am your host, Jason Muhammad, founder of JM Leadership Consulting. Today's episode, we're discussing the power of connection, how to connect and why is connecting so important. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, leaders. Thank you so much for joining us for the episode of Leadership is Podcast, the power of connection. There are three components of true connection, and we're going to talk about those components here today and really what is the power of connection. You know, of course, we're living in such a social distance world, fortunately, but maybe unfortunately, that is that barrier, right, that separates us from having, personal connection and personal interaction is beginning to deteriorate as we're going into different phases of this COVID-19 pandemic, right? And so, which means that we're now able to, at certain points, talk to each other, sit at restaurants. Of course, we have to practice social distancing practices, still. However, the power of connection is so much more important now than it ever has been, simply because of how we were separated, right, and isolated even in some instances as it relates to this COVID-19 pandemic. And so we want to talk about the power of connection today. Many people have become, if they were not already, many other people have become masters at this virtual connections, right? Being able to connect over social media using, other platforms of a digital age, right? With Zooms and Google Meet and meetings and Teams, all of these different digital platforms that people are using to bring people in together to connect with people. And so today we want to talk about that, the power of connection. And so the three components of true connection, right, is number one, you want to create a visual bridge. So what is a visual bridge, right? Well, a bridge is something that, helps to transport or connect one place to another place, right? You even have some people who are bridges that can connect one person to another person, or even some entities that can connect one company to another company. So when you're creating a visual bridge, what this means is you're connecting what is it with what will be, right? This is like future forecasting, right? So what is currently now with what will be. See, when you're making connections with people, the first thing you're doing is when you're creating this visual bridge is, you're already seeing that you have connected with this person. You're already seeing the word yes in your mind when you're making these connections. Where is this important? When you're sitting down to have a meeting with someone, to have a pitch idea or a pitch meeting, right? Even virtually, when you're having a virtual pitch idea and meeting, well, you want to make a connection to the person or company, agency, or organization or entity that you're trying to connect to, or trying to submit this pitch to. You want to have a connection. There's power in connecting. It's like the plug going into the socket. You can tell that it's truly connected when whatever the plug is connected is attached to begins to work. The electricity begins to flow in it. And so you want to make sure that the first component of a connection when you're having a pitch idea or sitting down to sell anything, and keep this in mind also, that in business as well as in life, everything is sales. Everything is, you're always selling something. You're always pitching something to someone. So when you're going to do that, when you're going to pitch or when you're going to sell, you have to make the connection. And so the first component of true connection is create a visual bridge. Right? A visual bridge, and which means that you're connecting what is currently with what will be, or what you want it to be, or what you desire. The second the second part of the creating a visual bridge is you want to find the mutual, right? So what helps with connecting what is to what will be is finding the mutual. What is mutual there? What is the mutual benefit for them as well as for you, right? What is the mutual interest between you and them? What is it that you have in common that will truly connect you? And then the third part of the creative visual bridge is you want to sharpshoot, which means you don't want to waste your ammo on something that is not a part of what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish. You don't want to waste your ammo on that which will not connect what is with what will be. So the first component of true connection is create a visual bridge. The second component of true connection is introduction. Is the introduction. So let's go. The first part of the introduction is perception. Is you got to know, right? Here's some things about it. Is you have to know that perception is formed within the first 7 seconds of meeting someone. A person can have their perception of you within the first 7 seconds of meeting you. And you also have to keep in mind, right, with that is that the attention span is only 8 seconds, which is a second less than that of a goldfish. So you have to make sure that, again, the first component of building true connection, it creates a visual bridge. It is so important that you allow that to drive your introduction. See? You have to make sure that you create a visual bridge, right? You're connecting what is with what will be once you find the mutual, and then you sharpshoot, or don't waste your ammo on something that is not within the mutual, that is not connecting what is with what will be. So it is so important and critical that you create the visual bridge part right before you even go into the verbal introduction, or even in this day and age, right, the digital virtual introduction. And so when you do the introduction, you got to keep in mind that perception is formed in the first 7 seconds. And the human attention span is only 8 seconds, which is, 1 second less than that of a goldfish. And then you have to practice attentive listening. One of the worst things you can do when you're having a conversation with someone is to zone out, right? It's to zone out or not pay attention. Having someone to continuously or redundantly repeat what they say because you're not focused on what they're saying. You're really not listening to what they're saying, and you're not listening to learn, but you're listening to interpret or to interrupt, rather. You're listening to respond. Right. And so you have to practice attentive listening. Attentive listening is when you suspend. And we've talked about this on one of our earlier podcasts on how to actually attentively listen, or what attentive listening is. Right. And this is one of the components of, what coaches do. And I've talked about this in one of my other podcasts as well about, the 5 components of an effective coach. And one of them is attentive listening. And so attentive listening is, you have to suspend judgment. You have to nod and show understanding. You have to, repeat what you hear. right? You have to repeat it so that you can show understanding to the person and also to show that you're listening. So you have to practice attentive listening. The third part of the introduction is you have to pique the interest. And how do you do that? The best way to pique someone's interest that you're speaking with when you're trying to make a connection, right, is you have to create or set a mutual ground. And how you do that is you start with what interests them, what they are interested in, and the best thing that they're interested in, the most important thing that a person is interested in is hearing their name. So it is important that you learn someone's name early. Put a picture or something attached to it. Come up with a way of how you can memorize someone's name when you're striving to make a connection. Because, it is bad when they can call your name, but you cannot call their name. So let's kind of recap the first two. 3 components of a true connection. First one is create a visual bridge, right? And that is connecting what is with what will be. Find the mutual, sharpshoot. The second component of true connection is the introduction. And things you have to know about the introduction is perception is formed in the first 7 seconds. Practice attentive listening and pique the interest, and set a mutual ground. And that starts by starting with what interests them. And the most important aspect or the most important thing that interests the person that you're speaking to is their name. So the third component of true connection is to establish the connection. Establish the connection. See, you will establish a connection if we critically look at the importance of creating the visual bridge before you go into your introduction, right? So you create the visual bridge. You're connecting what is with what will be. And you do that by finding the mutual. And then you sharpshoot, with the rest of your conversation in that, within that visual bridge there, right? You sharpshoot. You're looking at, okay, what matters most to this person? What matters most? And you get all of this information by doing your research. Before you even do the introduction or talking to them, you find out all of this information by doing your research on this company, agency, organization, or person, individual, right? Before you even go into the introduction. So you have already found out how to connect what is with what will be by finding the mutual and then sharpshooting, your points that you want to make in connecting with this person, its agency, company, or organization, because you want to make sure that, in your introduction, you realize that the perception is formed in the first 7 seconds, that, you want to practice attentive listening as they're talking, and you want to pique their interest by simply repeating their name or saying their name. Once you get past that, you can establish the connection. And what happens in establishing the connection is you're building the relationship. You're building the relationship. In one of my podcasts, I did a 3-part series on the 3 keys for leaders to develop influence. And one of them was build impactful relationships, right? And with building relationships, that one of the primary components of building a relationship is you insulate that relationship with trust. You insulate it with trust. Insulation is something that does not allow what's inside to seek outside and does not allow what's unwanted from the outside to seek inside. So you want to insulate your relationship with trust. Secondly, you want to use influence. You want to use influence. As I've stated before, and I quote this again, John C. Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So for leaders to have the power of connection in establishing the connection, right, you want to use influence. Use the influence you already have and use the influence that they already have. Remember, you want to keep in mind that you want to keep piquing their interest as you're establishing this relationship, right? So you want to start with what is mutual, right? What you have in common, but you also want to start that mutuality with them by saying their name. Okay? So you want to use your influence. And then the last part of establishing the connection is leverage the bridge and the intro. Leverage the visual bridge you created and the introduction that you made, right? You want to leverage that. When you're introducing yourself, you want to introduce yourself going back to the second component of the three components of true connection. When you're introducing yourself, right? How do you leverage that introduction? Well, again, it's some things you know that perception is formed in the first 7 seconds. And so what is the perception that you want to give to the person, agency, company, or organization that you're introducing yourself to? You want to give the perception that you know something about them. You value them and their time. You value their product, their services. That's what you want to show in the perception, is that you value you value them. You've taken the time to learn someone's name. You value their name. Okay. So recap all of the three components of true connection: create a visual bridge, introduction, and you establish the connection. And what this does, right, all within that small amount of time that you're making the connection to the company, agency, organization, or individual, is that it does three things. It breaks barriers, it builds trust, and it influences decisions. What do we mean by that? The barriers, right? So whatever barriers, reluctancy, hesitation that they may have in this pitch meeting, in this pitch idea, in this sales meeting, you break the barriers down because you have properly created a visual bridge. And that was shown in your introduction as you made your established connection, right? You broke down the barriers, right? And then once you break down barriers, number two should be number one, is that it builds trust, right? But they had to trust you in order for the barrier to be broken down. But again, it builds trust. Builds mean it's something that is still in the works. So it builds trust. It continues, right, to build trust. And then number three, within the power of connection, is that it influences decisions, which means that the people say, you know what? I like this guy. I like this lady. I would like to do business with this lady. Or they might even not like you personally, right? Because you have to keep in mind that they also are studying you. And they're using emotional intelligence. However, they might like the product or the business that you represent. See? So the three components of true connection is create a visual bridge, the introduction, establishes the connection. And then what the power of the connection is, once you have used the three components of connection, once you are connected, the power of connection is it breaks barriers, it builds trust, and it influences decisions. Greetings, leaders. I'm here to talk to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and or computer. Now, how convenient is that? Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast, too, with no minimum listenership. So it's everything that you need to make a podcast in one place. So do me a favor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I look forward to seeing the greatness within you. Hey, thank you so much for enjoying another episode of Leadership Is Podcast as we discussed the power of connection. And we looked at three things dealing with the power of connection, which is it breaks barriers, it builds trust, and it influences decisions. So how important is the power of connection to you and your business as it relates to your leadership? I work with emerging leaders, high potential employees, and students to develop and embrace a growth mindset for leadership. If you would like for us to do a presentation, keynote your next event, or for a free half-hour consultation, please contact us, jason@jmleadershipconsult.com. Or visit my website, www.jmleadershipconsult.com, or call us at 828-333-7234, and we will respond promptly. Please subscribe to this podcast using the Anchor app or anchor.fm. Also found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts with Jason A. Muhammad /Leadership Is. And please follow us on our social media, which is Twitter @LeadershipJM. Then Facebook and Instagram is JM Leadership Consulting. And always remember, leadership is influence and service.